Hey everybody, welcome to Woodworking Wisdom. My name's Colwin Way, and today it's all about driftwood turning, which is a good opportunity really, or has been a good opportunity for me to go for a walk along the beach. We've got some pictures to show in a minute, but we'll get to those in a sec. We did ask for questions, and good old reliable Maria. Thank you ever so much, Maria, because you sent in 3 or 4 questions that we're going to get to in a minute. So yeah, and hopefully that's going to spur you guys on to ask as well. Just to let you know, we've got Matt on cameras and all the trickery, and don't forget, if you have any questions, please, as well as put them in the chat, let's discuss them as well. So I don't get to see your discussions, but Matt obviously asked the question, so please put them there, and hopefully, as well as the discussion on the chat, I'll be able to get to ask them for you as well. So let's have a look at, first of all, what we're going to be turning. Hopefully I'm going to turn about 2 or 3 projects for you. The idea behind today's stream, though, is to generate questions and talk about the process of turning driftwood. Because let's face it, if you walk along the beach and you find a bit of timber, you have no idea where from around the world that piece of timber has come from. So there's all sorts of things that you've got to think of. And also you've got to think about the way or the harsh conditions that timber has been in. It's probably soaked up a huge amount of salt water. It's probably got lots of little critters in it. It's probably got lots of horrible things that are going to knock bits out of the tools. So lots of things to consider when you're turning it. And that's going to bring me on, before we look at any photos, any nice pictures, just to a few of the questions that Maria asked, or points that she wanted to raise as discussions. So we're going to look at the timber. Let's just have a brief look at the timber that I'm using here, and then we'll look at some of the others that I took a photo of earlier on today. So this particular piece, yeah, and I'm not lying here in any way at all. I got this morning about 6 a.m. went for a nice blustery walk down the beach. The photos that I'm going to show you from yesterday, which wasn't so blustery, but these are the ones I got this morning. This piece was about 8 foot long in total. I've got these bits here. I've got a couple of logs beside me on the bench. There's a big lump that I'm going to show you down beside me also, and the fork on the floor I want to just make a point about also. But look, this is quite an unusual piece. Matt, can we go overhead just to show? There's and this is running all the way through. I don't know whether you can see that on the camera, but it's almost like a spider's web running into the center. I had a conversation with Jason, and we're sort of putting heads together and thinking there's potential that it could be older, maybe, looking at the bark. It's an interesting one, this one. I have seen this as driftwood before, so I think this has come from around our coast here in the southwest of the UK, only because I've seen a lot of it on the beaches. Okay, but yeah, there are lots of it. So this is a good point. Let's go on to the photos a second, Matt, as well as what I've picked up this morning. Let's just have a look at some of the other pieces that I was looking at. Now, this is in Lyme Regis, where I live. This is a beach called Monmouth Beach. This is the rocky sort of side away from the sandy side. So this is just looking out toward Seaton, and you can see the grey cliffs there, the fossil cliffs in the distance. And my walk was along there. So off we got up next there, and that. So Jurassic Coast. This is why it gets its name. These are littered all across the beach. So you see that slab of blue lice there, with all the ammonites just lying in it. So I just thought I'd take a picture of that, because I just thought it was quite apt. I was walking along the beach and there it was. So yeah, so look, now this is, I couldn't carry this under my arm, unfortunately. This was a lump of beech. Got a little bit of spalting going on there. People have taken chainsaws to them once on the beach or before they got to the beach. I'm not quite sure, but there's lots of cuts and chainsaw markings and things. But this is obviously has a little bit of work done to it. But that's a piece of beech with lots of mottled markings in it. And then the next one, I believe, yeah. So this is what happens when you get these lumps lying around and washed up on this type of beach. You can see the size of the rocks around it, but they do get weathered in really interesting architectural ways. And I can imagine that in someone's nice big garden, just sitting there, but a lovely bit of sculptural work done by nature. And the next one is, again, I wanted to get this put this under my arm and bring this home. This is that beach that we were looking at, that I showed you the end of earlier on. You can sort of see there's a little bit of a blustery area, but a bright one. And again, not a little bit too big. I carried on walking, hoping to find more little gold nuggets, and I did. Little pippy burrs on this timber. I'm guessing that might have been an oak. I didn't look at the end grain on this one, but really interesting weathered features on that one. And then how many more have we got? I think we've got a few more. Oh, I know we've got a few more. So I kept going, and then these sorts of things start turning out. Now, when I start seeing these, I know they're becoming a little bit thicker on the ground. So I hadn't taken a saw with me. I wasn't going to start cutting things up, but I knew that I was getting closer to the sort of size that I wanted. I didn't want to take any massive pieces. Saying that, the piece that I did bring home this morning was 8 foot long, but I did eyeball where I wanted to be. There we are. Just an example of sort of what we're looking for. You can see the cliffs reaching into the distance there. And any more? Was that it? Oh, this is the, yeah, sorry. This is I took this picture yesterday, like I said, but this is the piece that I eventually brought home, or part of it. I just wanted to show you the bark, and that's what I mean by potentially older as a bit of bark, still with the rubbish on it. And this is a point that I wanted to make here. So when you bring driftwood home, and a point that Maria goes on to make as well, when you bring it home, it could have all sorts in it. Now, this particular one here is covered in obviously mud from where it either came out or where it ended up in amongst all the roots. Now, within amongst that mud and clay are lots of little stones and pips and things like that. So yeah, that's my day foraging, and a nice little trip along the beach. Now, I did say that I wanted to show you the fork of the one that I brought home, and there's a good reason for that. Well, this is the fork. All the other pieces were from this section here. But look, again, if we maybe go to the overhead, we looked at the clay that is embedded in the roots of the one that I had before. This little fella in here, so things like stones and stuff like that. And that's just part of it. You know, under all of this bark, there could be bits of grit, bits of sand, and even bugs and things like that. So do be a bit careful. Have a good inspection before you put things on the lathe, and even before you bring it home. And Maria made a good point of saying, you know, there's the little critters that live under here don't really belong in the workshop. They belong down on the beach where they come from. So give the piece a good knockout first. Take off any loose bits of bark, things like that. Make sure that the things living inside it stay where they should do on the beach. But it's a really good point. Apart from that, you know, your own safety as well. We don't want loose fragments coming off and hitting you. I have taken off many of the loose bits of bark here. I've had a good inspection. And the end of this piece of timber was actually burnt. So there's smoke running up through it. And we in the workshop here, unfortunately, it's not smell-o-vision. You can't smell it, but it's a really quite a deep smell of smoke, because it ran up through the cracks in these pieces of wood, and now it's everywhere. But some quite burry pips here. I am going to wear my dust mask, my visor here, because again, just to make sure that if there anything does come off, I'm fully protected. But look, all of these loose bits, and underneath it, wherever you have a loose bit, I'm just seeing sand and grit. So things to just take the edge off the chisel. So I'm going to rough this piece down first with a roughing gouge, sacrifice my roughing gouge to move on. The other things, I'm going to grab Maria's email here just to remind me what was said. So pardon me for looking down whilst I read this. But yeah, one of the first points she makes is about the sand, you know, and Maria's got experience of turning pieces and creating things from a driftwood. And she's like we're witnessing here, lots of little sand underneath. I don't know whether the overhead can pick that up. You can just see those little speckles. That's bits of grit and sand. So you must be aware of that. They will knock the edges off your tools quite regularly. So be prepared for sharpening often. But do what we said here, you know, just take that bark off first, clean off, brush off any bits. I have gone on to even jet spray some of the pieces to make sure that we've got as much mud, as much muck and stuff like that out as possible. So that's always a good one. And that takes us on to the next thing. The water that's in, a lot of the time these are soaked with, is salt water. It's aggressive and abrasive. If you remember a few months ago, we were talking about turning wet oak, and the same thing happens there. It's very aggressive on any steel. that it's going to come into contact with. So you do need to clean down, maybe put a sheet around the rest of the workshop to stop those abrasive and corrosive shavings from touching anything else. Clean your tools down afterwards, clean the bed of the lathe down afterwards, maybe put some oil on before, just as a barrier, for instance. And the same with your fingers, but just be a little bit careful of it. So yeah, in summary there, clean down, wash down, even submerge in water, scrub off, all those sorts of things. If it's already soaked into the timber, you're not going to get rid of it. That's just part of the drying process. You might want to leave things to dry. This has had a bit of time out of the sea. It's dried quite well. There's a bit of dampness there, probably only on the exterior through rain and things like that, but it's not too bad on the interior. So it's weathered in the out of the sea for a fair while. The other things that we're talking about here are environmental concerns. So just that, don't go taking anything that you see. Make sure that it's not going to harm what's around it when you take it. Bugs, any other wildlife around it. Don't go traipsing over flower beds to get to the sand dunes where your lovely pieces are. Just make sure you're a little bit sympathetic to where you're gathering this from. Along the beach that I showed you earlier on, there's just fires on fires. I think a lot of people go there at the end of the day and see the sunset and have a little fire. So most of this is or certainly the small stuff is taken before I get to it. But just be a little bit aware of that. And there we are. The other thing, or the last thing that we were talking about on that email there, was just you don't know where this comes from. For instance, it could be square stock. If it is square stock, hasn't been treated with anything, could it be dangerous to your health when sanding and when creating dust, those sorts of things? Could it have bits of metal included, screws, staples, anything like that? So inspect it properly, even before you get to the bandsaw. You don't want to take the edge off your bandsaw blades, but when this is spinning, things start flying out. Just be a little bit aware of that. I've turned a fair bit of driftwood, and if I'm absolutely honest with you, it will weather to the point of a grey over time. You're never going to get as nice a piece of timber as a dry, properly treated piece of timber, but you can get the odd gem every now and again, burrs and things like that. And it's very much a unique look. So once sanded and polished, you can really get some interesting things. Don't expect lovely bits of I don't know, ebony or cocobolo or spalted timbers or burr timbers every time you go down, because you're not going to get it. But you will get interesting things like this. I don't know what this is going to look like. I've got a fair idea of things in the past, but everything is different. I'm going to try and turn 2, potentially 3 projects for you, but keep asking questions. Let's have a look and see what happens. Anything to start us off with?
Good afternoon, everybody. Just got a few questions about what's the best way to dry the timber, and does the salt water change any of the characteristics of turning it?
Yeah, so the salt water does change characteristics. It takes a lot of the color away. Whether that's salt water and the sun or what, I don't know, but it actually bleaches the timber. So you will find a lot of the timber will all go one uniform color, almost like all timber does after a while, but this is a little bit quicker. The process is sped up. Drying it's no different. Drying it is exactly the same, and you can rough turn if you want to. If you get big enough sections, then absolutely you can rough turn. But most of the time you'll find the weather has got to it. Salt water sort of acts like PEG, polyurethane glycol, so the drying liquid, where it replaces the sap in the timber, and then you've got to get rid of the salt water, which will evaporate quicker than the sap will. Okay, so it does a lot of drying regardless of whether it's been submerged in salt water or not. But and again, after time, Maria tells the story of drying some in a microwave, only to discover the smell that it made in the kitchen afterwards. That is the trouble with timber that has been submerged in salt water for a long time. It does go off. You start to get that really ripe smell, not pleasant smell in any way. So, consider all these things. But let's have a look and see what we're going to get. Hopefully, it's going to be a pretty timber by the end of it. I'm going to have dust extraction running all the time. I don't want to breathe in any of the muck that's coming off of this. only because it's quite smoky. That's the reason, really. Lots of little pips here. So let's stop talking and start turning. So here goes. Just rough down to start with. I'm going to have dust extraction running, like I say. And I'm going to start with a roughing gouge just to take the worst away. Lathe speed to 0, turn the lathe on. I have checked the tool rest already. Yeah, so let's go up in speed. So about 1600 revs there at the moment. And there is a crack running down through this. I'm not worried about that. This is going to be a little decorative tree. Because I want to work with the crack, really. I'm not going to call it a Christmas tree just yet, but it is a little decorative tree. There's some lovely little pips and things like that in here. It's going to be pretty. There's the crack, but it's going to be a feature, everybody. This is going to be a £10 feature crack. Little tenon now. So let's just tidy up that edge first. There we are. Then I'm going to make a tenon for my chuck. We're going to part this off of the tenon at the end. I just want to do a couple of little speedy projects for you. There we go. Now, whilst I'm there, that's our first one. So all ready to mount in the chuck and do the actual project. Let's do the other piece as well. I've got a slightly bigger piece here. I've already prepped that, so it's just very slightly bigger. And again, it has this crack in this up the side. That's fine. We're going to make a feature of it. Check all corners or all faces. Lathe speed to 0 because it's a different piece of timber. Try and lay that. There we are. That was a slightly thicker bit of timber, that one, look. So we're going to do the same thing, create a tenon. And you've got some real bird's eyes, and this is really pretty timber. That was the luck of the draw. So again, let's do a tenon. So this one I'm going to do a vase with. Nice simple project. We've done many times for you. But let's just have a look and see what our vase will look like in this. There we are. We'll move. I'm going to keep the tailstock there just for a minute because we're going to use it on the next couple of projects. I'll turn the dust extraction off just while we're changing things around and whilst I'm talking. Any questions whilst I'm busying away, Matt?
There's a question from Artful Bodger. How about pressure washing before turning?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, pressure washing, jet washing. You're dead right. Yeah, just especially if you've got any gnarly bits, you know, sort of root balls and stuff like that. It really gets into everything. But yeah, any of those cracks, it'll take out a lot of the sand and a lot of the surface salt and things like that. So yeah, no, be perfect.
And then there's another one from Frederick. Do you have any particular attention to what type of finishing that can be used?
No. So I've got two finishes here. I've got a finishing oil, and I've got some sanding sealer and some wax. I think I'm gonna go sanding sealer and wax only because I want to have a slightly shiny finish on this tree. Let's have a look. I'm not sure about the vase yet. Possibly similar. There we are. Nothing's different here. This is now turned into a project as opposed to just talking about driftwood. This is, what we would normally do on if this was a normal piece of timber. So there. So a little tree.
Let's start with a roughing gouge. Lathe speed up a little bit. So I'm going to part this off. So we're going to make a parting tool mark, or where we're going to eventually part off to. Parting tool. So I know how far to cut. So that's where we're parting off to. There we go. And let's now clean that finish up. This is a really fallen on my feet here. This is a stunning bit of timber. It's got little dots. It's almost like a bit of bird's eye. Really pretty. So let's go with the bowl gouge next. I think we're just going to make a nice cut, clean that top surface up. A little bit more. Okay, and I just want to have another look at that surface. This is looking so pretty. Look at this. It's like lots of little darts in it. Gorgeous stuff. Okay. Let's do some marks. So I'm going to put some little limbs in this. So let's go. That'll do, I think. Let's go skewer. There we go. Right now we can let's get in there with spindle gouge. Lovely, like that. We can take the tailstock out of the way, or just back for the minute. Just repeating the same cuts over and over again here. Just using the spindle gouge to get right in. Flip it to clean up. Last one. I'm really getting that smell of smoke now. Yeah, let's just stop and have an inspection of that. My little £10 feature running up the side, look. Yeah, happy with that. I think we can sand. Matt, have you got any questions before we start making a noise?
There's a question from Dance with Aardvarks. Are the darts the same thing as flat woodworkers call cathedrals?
I don't know. I've never heard of the term before. I don't know there. Ask the question. What's everybody else think? It's an unusual one. I don't know. I never even... I know we said older. I'm still not sure. There's some lovely yellow streaks coming through. But my honest answer, I don't really know. It's sort of streaking down through. Let's start sanding away. Nice and quick. We're going to add a bit of wax to it then. So this is 100 grit I'm working with here. A little bit careful not to cut yourself on these sharp edges. Blunt them over if they're too sharp. There we are. Let me just make sure all the nasties have gone, and all we need to clean out now are the sanding marks. Yeah, we're good. Let's just drag a little bit of that abrasive up through that crack to get rid of the burrs. Yeah. Good. I want to properly show off our feature. There we are, down to 240. There we are. Let's have a quick look at that. Oh, that's really nice. It's always nice when actually it works. You get a little bit of something for nothing, which obviously this timber is, apart from a nice walk along the beach, of course. A little bit of sanding cedar on that. Let's just colour jump out. It is quite dry. You can see the dust was coming off quite easily. It's not clogging up the abrasive, so that sort of tells me that we've got a nice dry bit of timber. Wipe off the excess there. Bit of tissue. You all right for questions at the moment? Good. Six o'clock this morning, I was down the beach getting this. Photos were taken yesterday because this morning it was pitch black at 6 o'clock. But it was lovely, nice, warm, heavy wind. That's all right. little bit of sanding sealer on. Let's turn the lathe down really low. Turn the lathe on. A little bit of light abrasive there, just a denib. Go, and let's put a bit of wax on. I'm going to do that without the lathe on. It's I'm going to clean out that little crack. You can tell that crack wasn't during drying. That was a drying crack. That was with it for a long time. Sorry, it wasn't drying. It was whilst the tree was growing, because you can see how aged it is. You can see the dark markings in it. I mean, it's endless. Really, the projects are endless. It's no different here than a regular piece of dry timber that you would buy off the shelf or cut from a board. There we go. And lastly, we'll part that one off. We're going to get this close to the camera in a minute, just so you can see those streaks, but you can sort of see them there. That's working. Lovely little markings in this one. And we'll part this one off. You don't, of course, have to do this. You don't have to part it off. You can make it between centers and then tidy it this nib when you've finished. But just this, for this demonstration, I thought was the easiest way to demonstrate. So I'm going to now just part off. We'll do the same thing with the vase in a moment. Now you can part this flush and then put a little disc sander on it, or you can just part it with a very slight dish on the underside. There we are. Now all my rings are off my hands, so I'm just going to very gently support. Pop the parting tool in. Note that the tailstock isn't engaged now. We can't have the tailstock there, otherwise things are bind. So it's nice and gentle, and here we come. The thing's going to stop in my hand. There we go, right now. Have our nice little... I'm not allowed to use the word Christmas yet, hence the reason I'm saying a decorative tree. Everyone's being boring for Christmas. I was just going to find a brush because there's a little bit of wax deposits in there that I want to get out. So a little bit of a brush, just to brush that out and then give it another buff. I've got a bit of a nib that I need to clean out. So just gently pare that off, give it a bit of a sand. Maybe a bit of wax on the bottom. All right, but there's a nice little tree. Let's get this nice and close to that camera so you can sort of start seeing those markings. Isn't it pretty? Believe it's older, not quite sure, but it's nice, whatever it is. And I didn't pay anything for it. So there's our first one. Let's just have a look at another project. We go on to a little vase. Going to use the tailstock again, just to begin with. We're going to actually bore out the center. I'm going to go and get a drill bit in a minute. So that was the piece, wasn't it? That piece there. We have got a crack running all the way through. This doesn't matter. This means we can charge extra for it. And we'll keep it the same dimension. Let's just tidy up that outer surface. I'm going to do that by dropping the handle of the bowl gouge down and just running, because for the vase shape, this is going to be the high spot here. They're right on this area, so sort of halfway point. It's going to be the top shoulder. So I'm going to run the handle of the gouge down and present the bottom edge of the bowl gouge just like a skew and run along. There we go. I'm not going to go too deep at the moment. Next thing I want to do on this one, tidy up some of my tools, put them over here. Next thing I want to do is we're going to drill a hole and face that end grain there. So let's just take the tailstock out of the way just briefly. Going to bring or take out the center, and we're going to put a drill chuck on here. Let's go that one there. And a drill bit. Let me grab a bigger drill bit. I reckon we want to be up to around about 10 to 12 mil of drill bit on this one. So I reckon that one right there. Not going to go overly deep. This is a dried flower vase. We're not going to put water in it. So lathe speed to 0. Turn the lathe on. Turn the lathe up. Little bit of movement. Again, I'm not too worried. We'll make it right in a moment. You can get a little bit of screeching when you're drilling like this as well, so a little bit of your wood wax will really help. And when you've gone for the full movement of your quill, then tailstock loose, pop the whole mechanism in, and carry on drilling. That'll do us, I think, just for this exercise. We'll get rid of drill chuck and we'll create our flute, and that's really all I need of the drill chuck, of the tailstock. Really, I can move that out of the way now. Let's pop that down out of our way and lathe off. Move the tool rest around, and I'm going to create the flute of the vase next. So I'm going to go to a smaller gouge. Just go to a little 6mm in English, 3/8 in US. So I just want to, once I start sliding the bevel around this corner, to keep that curve flowing, I need to keep moving the handle around. So you'll see slowly that handle creeps around into that little hole in the bottom. And I'll start again. So the bevel's now sliding. I'm putting pressure up through the length of the bowl gouge. That's allowing the bevel to slide. And I'll keep the curve flowing by moving the handle. There we are, into the hole. So you should see now that we've got a nice curved flute running into that center hole. So that gives us now the opportunity to start shaping to that curve. How are we doing for questions, Matt?
I got a question from Steve. He's returning to woodwork after 9 or 10 years. And he's just asking for any recommendations on how to clean up or remove rust from old tools.
Well, it's funny you should say that. We're just creating a blog at the moment. We're just working on exactly that question. As in the UK, we're going into the autumn, so generally the wetter months. To clean up, if they're already rusty, then there's a huge amount of things that you can use. We use several things. So Abranet is a good one. Webrax is a good one. You can get the little Garaflex blocks, which are rubber blocks impregnated with grit. And we tend to use those with things like camellia oil to get the surface off. And that sort of impregnates the metal then with a bit of the oil also. That's quite a good one. And the same with the tools, things like Webrax and Garaflex to get all the bad stuff off. And then a little bit of camellia oil on the top again. I tend to camellia oil most weeks in the workshop because it's just it's a wet period at the moment, and that keeps it from getting too bad. It depends on the frequency of your turning as well. If you don't go in the workshop from, let's say, once a month, then things are gonna You know, things get rusty unless you coat them every time you leave them. I'm in the workshop most days, so it doesn't allow to get a hugely damp atmosphere. And I'm also drying the metal out every time I use it anyway. It's, you know, you got the layer of dust and the oil and all those sorts of things, so it's not too bad. But yeah, if you've already got something that's fairly badly rusted, then Garaflex, Webrax, Camellia oil, all those things, apart from the plethora of products for rust that are out there. But those are the friendly ones, if you know what I mean. All right, Matt.
There's another question from Sleeping Dog. Currently using a key chuck in my tailstock, but keyless would be preferred. Is that one that's just been used, the 13mm keyless on the website?
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
13mm. This is the gold, what they call it, golden goose chuck. I've been using these for, well, 20 years. They just work. And there's a lot of keyless chucks out there that don't have a decent grip. This one, once you've set it, is pretty much set there until you want to undo it, sort of thing. So I know I like those. Good size. All right, let's take away some of this excess. Okay, let's start the shoulder. So bevel rubbing, bring the handle round. Bring the speed up a wee bit. So handle round, so convex curve, so bevel sliding nicely. Bring the handle round, 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 and stop. Now we can start the concave. So just going to check now. Stop the lathe, just check. I'm going to pinch for thickness. I want to make sure the lathe is stopped. This edge is quite sharp and I don't want to cut myself. So checking, that's pretty good. Some features going on here. Down to a smaller gouge. I'll bring the shoulder down a wee bit further and then carry on with the neck. 10mm drill that I use, so I can sort of visualize that thickness, and that's about right there. I'm just going to crisp up this edge. I want there to be an actual defined line, so I'm using the right angle in the corner of the parting tool to do that. And then again, we'll take off a little bit of waste. So push cuts first. Just take off anything that's in my way. And then flip the gouge over and push the bevel around. And stop nice and early. I think we'll do one more of those. Bevel rubbing, bring the handle round. Very gentle pressure at the length of the tool that allows the bevel to then run forward. And you bring the handle round to suit the curve you want. That'll do for the minute. Let's just stop and have a look. We don't want any surprises. I want to know what's happening here. That little, it's just a bit of ingrowing bark. Now that's going to creep up here the more we take. A little bit of a dead branch going on there. A little bit of a, not a particularly nice crack there. You can choose to fill that with resin, leave it, open it out even, put stitches in it, do whatever you want. You really go creative with things like that. Turn those flaws into features. Like I say, I'm going to leave it. I'm going to put a parting tool cut in where we're eventually going to part off. There. I think let's just take one more cut to make that base just a wee bit smaller. But get a little bit careful. You want the vase to stand up when it has things in it, so be a little bit careful how small you do go. But let's just tidy that around. Keep the curve flowing. Nice. I think that's about ready for sanding there, I believe. Again, we'll stop, we'll check, we'll take the tool rest out of the way. Have a look at those lovely markings again. I'm going to take out all this sharp edge here with the abrasive in a moment. Yeah, and we're good to go. So let's go with a 100 grit first with the dust extraction on, of course. This is a nice little rounded edge. Going to roll up the abrasive, get that down into that drill hole, clean out some of the ragged area in the bottom, and then up. Just make sure that flute is nicely sanded. Okay. Don't lazy sand. Make sure you sand into your features, not over them. You're working really hard to get those tools working how you want them to. So don't go and sand all the lovely features away. So remember what I always say, the first grit is there to take away all the nasties, turning marks, tears, all those sorts of things. And then your grits following will take away the previous sanding marks. Right, stop and check. I always stop and check after the first grit just to make sure what I've just said has happened. All the nasties have gone. Yeah, that's nice, like that. So let's go on up and just repeat. So into the center, make sure your flute is nice and clean. Again. Good. Stop and see where we are. Really, really pretty timber. Let's do the same thing again. Let's go for an oil finish on this one, so we can just change it up a little bit. So this is finishing oil in this one. I'll make sure we get that covered. How are we doing for questions whilst I'll stop them out? All good? So then, thanks for those questions, Maria. They're really appreciated. It gives us a platform to start with. It creates conversation, so that was great. There we are. So get a good coat. The first oil, always get a good layer on. The only issue with oil is that you have to wait for it to dry before you put the next one on, otherwise you get a tacky surface. So what I tend to do is put one on, but this will be parted off. And then once parted off and dry, give it a good buff. You can do that with a polishing mop if you need. and then apply another very, very light coat. Every subsequent coat after your initial one should be light and again allowed to dry. Okay. It's really absorbing it, so it must have been out of the sea for a long time because it's really drying well. Go a little bit at a time. If you go too quickly, the oil will start coming out. Remember, your timber is like a big dense sponge, and so the oil will stay liquid for a long time inside, and those centrifugal forces just repel it back out again, usually all over your face, over your visor. There we are. As it starts to dry, what happens is the dust and the oil will create a little slurry, and that acts like a grain filler then, so you can really get like almost like a silkiness to the finish. Yeah, that'll do for the minute. I normally say shavings, but I'm going to go straight into tissue and clean this off. A little bit of buffing going on here, a bit of burnishing, a bit of heat. Now, if that was it for your project and that was it for the night or for the day, you could leave that where it is, come back to it the next day, another light coat, do what I'm doing here again. And every time you apply another coat of oil, the finish will become brighter and brighter, so i.e. shinier and shinier, almost like French polish. Apply more, you get a better finish. If you've got other things to do, pass it off and do what I said, burnish separately off the lathe. If you're making a batch, I would probably not choose oil. I would go with sanding sealer and waxes. They will give you a nice finish. That's giving it a real dark, rich sort of look to it. Again, those lovely little streaks coming up through. All right, let's part off. Down to, I don't know, whatever that is, 15 mil in there, 5/8, then supports. Part off nice and gently. Don't grip too hard. If you grip hard, things are going to heat up and you're going to let go. So just support. My fingers are fully around the neck of the vase, but not gripping tightly. There we are, and pop just comes off. Again, we've got another little project. Let's just do the bottom. And again, maybe the rotary sander on that, just to clean that off, give it a nice finish. Then you can put your signature on the bottom if you want to. There we go. Let's just put my mask to one side and get those two little projects out. There we are. That was lying on the beach this morning. So I'm quite chuffed with it. And I've got loads of timber left there as well. So we've got lots of things we can do with those. I probably think I'm going to do more trees with those, Matt. But yeah, lovely colours that have come from those. And I mean, again, let's go overhead for a minute, Matt. It's just to see that sort of spider web effect that we've got coming from there. I have no idea what that is, but it's beautiful. Really nice markings on both of those pieces. There. Any more questions, Matt, whilst we're here before we disappear?
Yeah, so we've got quite a few.
Okay.
So there's one from Frederick. Is there any truth in the saying that if you find anything on the beach and it's above high tide mark, someone else has already found it?
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, Colwin. A bit off topic. It's from Martin, but the nativity figures that you made last year, have you ever made large ones around 2 feet high?
Never. That'll be a lump of wood, wouldn't it? But no, never. That sounds like you might have a project in mind there, but no, never. Good idea though.
There's a question from Maria. Is there any finish you wouldn't use on a piece of salty driftwood?
If it was still wet, Maria, that would cancel out quite a lot of the finishes that we use. Oil would probably be the best one on that one. If it completely dry, then I can't think of one, if I'm honest. I'm not quite sure how acrylic would work. So things like the lacquers, I don't know how that would work with salt, really. But everything else I've worked with, certainly oils, sanding sealers, and I'm bearing in mind I'm using the cellulose sanding sealers. They will work really, really well. Even take a buffing quite well. So with things like Triple E, Tripomax, buff compounds, Conol waxes, those sorts of things, it tends to hold, as long as it's dry, it tends to hold its sheen for as long as anything else, really.
There's another question from Sleeping Dog. Would you only sand an oil finish on the first coat and then just wipe on further coats, or sand with multiple coats?
Yeah, it depends on the wood. So what I would do is certainly sand the first one with all timbers, so just to get that that slurry built up, like I say, and then start grain filling. But then I would just check once that's dry and you've buffed and burnished off, you've put the next coat on. When you put it on, just sort of feel the surface. You'll feel the surface because you'll have the rag in your hand. But if it is still a little bit fluffy and bumpy, then give it a nice sand before you start. And you only need to denib, like I say. But generally, you've done the job once, and those little fibers have gone, so they can't stand back up. Sometimes I've had it where a little bit of dust as it's dried is sort of settled on it, so you might have to sand that off. But usually it's not too bad. But check. Very fibrous timbers, you might have that issue. You might have to sand it a second time. Right. All right, all good. Lovely. I really enjoyed that one for many reasons. Not just the fact that I've been able to go and walk on the beach a couple of days, and I felt I've had to go and walk on the beach. It's been nice. I wouldn't have been up at 6 o'clock this morning if it wasn't for that. So no, thank you. Don't forget. Remember what I'm always saying. If you like what you see, give us a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel and share us around. I'm off next week. I've got a little bit of a holiday coming up. I can't remember what we're doing. We're streaming something, but I won't be live next week. The others will be around. So until I come back, I won't see you or speak to you until next week. So thanks very much, everybody, and we'll see you again. Bye-bye.